Have you ever just stared up at the night sky and wondered, does this go on forever? I mean, really? Forever? Or could it be that if you traveled far enough in one direction, you'd somehow end up right back where you started? Well, today we're going to explore a really fascinating idea that messes with our whole concept of a single beginning and a final end. What if our universe is actually on a loop? So let's just get right to the heart of it. Is our universe some kind of one-way trip, just expanding endlessly into, well, who knows what? Or is it more like a giant cosmic story that's destined to repeat itself over and over again? This one question, right here, is the key to everything we're about to unpack. All right, so here's the game plan. We're going to start with the big mystery itself. Then I'll introduce you to a new way of looking at things, a simple three-step pattern that might just be universal. We'll see how that pattern could apply to the entire life of the cosmos. And then the really crucial part. How could we actually test this? How could we prove it wrong? And finally, we'll chew on the biggest question of all. What if it's true? Look, our standard model of cosmology, the Big Bang and all that, it's been incredibly successful. It explains so much, but it still leaves some really big questions on the table, puzzles that don't quite fit. And that's opened the door for some new ideas that suggest a totally different kind of order to the universe, a different shape, and maybe, just maybe, a very different fate for reality itself. So where do we even start with a new perspective like that? Well, what if there's something more fundamental going on? What if, underneath all the gravity and energy and cosmic forces, the universe is actually following a simple, repeating pattern? A kind of universal rhythm that guides how everything changes, from the tiniest particles to the whole cosmos. So this idea has a name. It's called Triune Harmonic Dynamics, or just THD for short. It's a cosmological model that was proposed by researcher, inventor, and author Kevin L. Brown. And what it does is suggests there's this really deep underlying order to how reality itself unfolds. And at the heart of this whole thing is a surprisingly simple three-step pattern. First, you have emergence. That's when something new is born. Then you get contrast, a period where that new thing is challenged or tested by tension. And finally, you have integration, where all those tested parts come together to form a new, higher level of order. You can just think of it as a beginning, a challenge, and then a renewal, a cycle that just might repeat over and over again. Now, this isn't just some vague philosophical concept. The THD model actually represents this whole idea with a single mathematical formula. And hey, don't worry, you don't need to be a math whiz or understand what all these symbols mean. The big takeaway here is that this formula is designed to describe the rhythm of that three-step pattern. It's suggesting that emergence, contrast, and integration aren't just words, but a fundamental, maybe even measurable, feature of how our universe works. Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting. How do we take this kind of abstract pattern and apply it to the biggest thing we know, the entire universe? How could this simple three-step cycle possibly map onto the birth, the life, and the ultimate fate of the cosmos? And this chart here lays it out perfectly. The emergence phase, that maps directly to the Big Bang. That's the start of everything. The expansion phase, well, that's the universe we're living in right now, where everything is spreading out and getting more disordered, what physicists call entropy. But then you get to that final integration phase. And this is where it suggests something called topological closure, which is a fancy way of saying space might actually wrap back around on itself, leading to a recurrence, a repeat, or some kind of cosmic reset. So you're left with two completely different pictures of reality. On one hand, the standard view, which points to an infinite universe that just expands forever. But the THD model, it predicts a finite universe, one where we should actually be able to find detectable repeating patterns, matched structures across the sky, real clues that space is wrapping back on itself. Okay, now we get to what I think is the absolute coolest part. You see, a good scientific theory isn't just about what it can explain. It's about whether it can be tested. Can it make predictions that could, potentially, be proven false? That's what separates real science from just speculation. And the THD model leans right into this. It doesn't hide. It proposes specific, measurable tests that could completely disprove the whole idea of a finite repeating universe. If we run the tests and the data doesn't show what it predicts, then the theory is wrong. It's as simple and as honest as that. So let's break down these tests. First up, we could search for what you might call cosmic déjà vu. We'd look at the afterglow of the Big Bang, the cosmic microwave background, and search for matched circles, repeating patterns of temperature. If we find nothing, that's a big blow to the theory. Second, we can measure the actual shape of space. If our measurements keep getting better and better, and they keep pointing to space being perfectly flat, converging on exactly zero curvature with no wiggle room, that would strongly suggest the universe is infinite, not a finite loop. All right, next up, test number 3. We could map out the locations of millions of galaxies and compare huge chunks of the sky to see if the large-scale patterns repeat. If it all just looks random, then there's no evidence of repetition. Test 4 is all about entropy, or disorder. In a closed repeating system, you'd expect there to be some kind of limit to how much disorder can build up. But if we observe that it just keeps growing without any limit, exactly like our standard models for an open, infinite universe predict, then that's another big problem for this theory. Test 5 is pretty straightforward. If our current standard model of cosmology eventually explains everything we see perfectly with no loose ends, then, well, we just don't need this new theory. And finally, test 6 is maybe the wildest one, looking for cosmic duplicates. See, in a loop-in universe, the light from a single galaxy could travel all the way around and reach us from different directions. We'd see it as identical twins in completely different parts of the sky. If we search and we find absolutely no mirrored images like that, it's a pretty strong sign that space isn't wrapping back on itself. So, after all that, after all the ways we could prove this thing wrong, what if we can't? What if we run the tests and we actually find evidence that our universe really is a finite repeating structure? I mean, the implications of that are just staggering. It would completely change everything. It would mean that reality isn't this one-way street, a straight line from a single beginning to a final, cold, dark end. Instead, it would be an eternal cycle, a constant rhythm of birth, growth, and renewal. Our entire understanding of time and our place in the cosmos would have to be rewritten. And that just leaves us with one last massive thought to chew on. If the entire universe is caught in this grand repeating loop, a cosmic story that's told again and again and again, what on earth does that imply about all the smaller stories unfolding inside of it, including ours?